Frederick Barbarossa, also known as Frederick I, was the Holy Roman Emperor from 1155 until his death in 1190. He was elected King of Germany in Frankfurt on March 4, 1152, and crowned in Aachen on March 9, 1152. He was crowned King of Italy on April 24, 1155 in Pavia, and Emperor by Pope Adrian IV on June 18, 1155 in Rome. 2 years later, the term «holy» first appeared in a document in connection with his empire. He was later formally crowned King of Burgundy et al. On June 30, 1178. He was named Barbarossa by the northern Italian cities which he attempted to rule. Barbarossa means red beard in Italian. In German, he was known as Kaiser Rotbart, which in English means Emperor Redbeard. The prevalence of the Italian nickname, even in later German usage, reflects the centrality of the Italian campaigns under his reign. Frederick was, by inheritance, Duke of Swabia, 1147 to 1152, as Frederick III, before his imperial election in 1152. He was the son of Duke Frederick II of the Hohenstaufen dynasty and Judith, daughter of Henry IX, Duke of Bavaria. Frederick, therefore, descended from the two leading families in Germany, making him an acceptable choice for the empire's prince-electors. Frederick joined the Third Crusade and opted to travel overland to the Holy Land. In 1190, he drowned while attempting to cross the Salef River, leading to most of his army abandoning the crusade before reaching Acre. Historians consider him among the Holy Roman Empire's greatest medieval emperors. He combined qualities that made him appear almost superhuman to his contemporaries. His longevity, his ambition, his extraordinary skills at organization, his battlefield acumen, and his political perspicacity. His contributions to Central European society and culture include the re-establishment of the Roman rule of law, which counterbalanced the papal power that had dominated the German states since the conclusion of the investiture controversy. Due to his popularity and notoriety in the 19th and early 20th centuries, he was used as a political symbol by many movements and regimes, government in Germany, especially under Emperor Wilhelm I, and the Nazi movement. This resulted in mixed legacies. Frederick was born in mid-December 1122 in Haguenau to Frederick II, Duke of Swabia, and Judith of Bavaria. His father was from the Hohenstaufen family, and his mother was from the Welf family, the two most powerful families in Germany. The Hohenstaufens were often called Ghibellines, a name derived from the Italianized version of Waiblingen Castle, the family seat in Swabia. The Welfs, in a similar way Italianization, were called Guelfs. Frederick was also a descendant of the Salian dynasty through his paternal grandmother, Agnes, as she was the daughter of Emperor Henry IV and Bertha of Savoy. He also had ties to the Salians through his mother, Judith, as she descended from Emperor Otto II and his wife, Theophanu. Therefore, Frederick carried on the bloodline of Emperor Otto the Great and his wives, Edgith and Adelaide. He learned to ride, hunt, and use weapons at an early age, but could neither read nor write. He was also unable to speak Latin until later in life. Frederick took part in several hoftage during the reign of his uncle, King Conrad III. These were informal and irregular assemblies popular among the nobles of the Holy Roman Empire. One took place in 1141 in Strasbourg, another in 1142 in Constance, followed by Ulm in 1143, Würzburg in 1144, and Worms in 1145. In early 1147, Frederick decided to join the Second Crusade after his uncle, King Conrad III, had taken the Crusader vow in public on December 28, 1146. Frederick's father, Duke Frederick II, strongly objected to this. According to Otto of Freising, the Duke berated his brother for permitting his son to go. The elder Frederick, who was dying, expected his son to look after his widow and younger half-brother once he had passed on, not risk his life by going on a crusade. Perhaps in preparation for the crusade, Frederick married Adelaide of Vohburg sometime before March 1147. His father died on April 6th, and Frederick succeeded him as the Duke of Swabia. The German Crusader army departed from Regensburg 7 weeks later. In August 1147, while crossing the Byzantine Empire, an ill crusader stopped in a monastery outside Adrianople to recuperate. There he was robbed and killed. Conrad ordered Frederick to avenge him. The Duke of Swabia razed the monastery, captured and executed the robbers, and demanded the return of the stolen money. The intervention of the Byzantine general Papacy prevented further escalation. A few weeks later, on September 8th, Frederick and Welf VI were among the few German crusaders who survived when a flash flood destroyed the main camp. They had decided to encamp on a hill away from the main army. The remains of the army reached Constantinople the following day. Conrad III attempted to lead the army across Anatolia, but finding this too difficult in the face of constant Turkish attacks near Dorylaeum, he decided to turn back. The rear guard was subsequently annihilated. Conrad sent Frederick ahead to inform King Louis VII of France of the disaster and ask for help. The French and German armies then advanced together. When Conrad fell ill around Christmas in Ephesus, he returned to Constantinople by ship with his personal retinue, which included Frederick. With Byzantine ships and money, the German army once again left Constantinople on March 7, 1148. They arrived in Acre on April 11th. After Easter, Conrad and Frederick visited Jerusalem, where Frederick was impressed by the charitable works of the Knights Hospitaller. He took part in the Council of Acre on June 24th. A decision was reached that the Crusaders would attack Damascus. The siege of Damascus, 24 to 28 July, lasted only 5 days and ended in failure. Gilbert of Mons recorded that Frederick prevailed in arms before all others in front of Damascus. On September 8th, the German army sailed out of Acre. On the route home, Conrad III and Frederick stopped in Thessaloniki, where they swore oaths to uphold the treaty with Emperor Manuel I Komnenos. This treaty obligated the Germans to attack King Roger II of Sicily in cooperation with the Byzantines. After confirming the treaty, Frederick was sent ahead to Germany. He passed through Bulgaria and Hungary, arriving in Germany in April 1149. When Conrad died in February 1152, only Frederick and the Prince Bishop of Bamberg were at his deathbed. Both asserted afterward that Conrad had handed the royal insignia to Frederick, indicating he should succeed him as king. Frederick energetically pursued the crown, and at Frankfurt on March 4th, 1152, the kingdom's princely electors designated him as the next German king. He was crowned king of the Romans at Aachen several days later, on March 9th, 1152. The reigns of Henry IV and Henry V left the status of the German Empire in disarray, its power waning under the weight of the investiture controversy. For a quarter of a century following the death of Henry V in 1125, the German monarchy was largely a nominal title with no real power behind it. The king, chosen by the prince-electors, was given no resources outside those of his own duchy, and he was simultaneously prevented from exercising any real authority or leadership. The royal title was furthermore passed from one family to another to preclude the development of any dynastic interest in the German crown. When Frederick was chosen as king in 1152, royal power had been in effective abeyance for over 25 years, and to a considerable degree for more than 80 years. The only real claim to wealth lay in the rich cities of northern Italy, which were still within the nominal control of the German king. The Salian line had died out with the death of Henry V in 1125, and the German princes refused to give the crown to his nephew, the Duke of Swabia, fearing he would try to regain the imperial power once held by Henry V. Instead, they chose Lothair III, reigned 1125 to 1137, who found himself embroiled in a long-running dispute with the Hohenstaufens and married into the Welf family. One of the Hohenstaufens gained the throne as Conrad III of Germany, reigned 1137 to 1152. When Frederick Barbarossa succeeded his uncle in 1152, there seemed to be excellent prospects for ending the feud, as he was a Welf on his mother's side. However, the Welf Duke of Saxony, Henry the Lion, remained an implacable enemy of the Hohenstaufen monarchy. Barbarossa had the duchies of Swabia and Franconia, the force of his own personality, and very little else to construct an empire. The Germany that Frederick tried to unite was a patchwork of more than 1,600 individual states, each with its own prince. A few of these, such as Bavaria and Saxony, were large, but many were too small to pinpoint on a map. The titles afforded to the German king were Caesar, Augustus, and Emperor of the Romans. By the time Frederick would assume these, they were little more than propaganda slogans with no real meaning. Frederick was a pragmatist who dealt with the princes by finding mutual self-interest. Unlike Henry II of England, Frederick did not attempt to end medieval feudalism, but rather tried to restore it, though this was beyond his ability. The great players in the German Civil War had been the Pope, Emperor, Ghibellines, and Guelphs, but none of these had emerged as the winner. Eager to restore the empire to the position it had occupied under Charlemagne and Otto I the Great, the new king saw clearly that restoring order in Germany was a necessary preliminary step to enforcing imperial rights in Italy. Issuing a general order for peace, he made lavish concessions to the nobles. Abroad, Frederick intervened in the Danish Civil War between Sven III and Valdemar I of Denmark, and began negotiations with the Eastern Roman Emperor, Manuel I Comnenus. It was probably around this time that the king obtained papal assent for the annulment of his childless marriage with Adelheid of Vohburg on the grounds of consanguinity. His great-great-grandfather was a brother of Adela's great-great-great-grandmother, making them fourth cousins, once removed. He then made a vain attempt to obtain a bride from the court of Constantinople. On his accession, Frederick had communicated the news of his election to Pope Eugene III, but he had neglected to ask for papal confirmation. In March 1153, Frederick concluded the Treaty of Constance with the Pope, wherein he promised, in return for his coronation, to defend the papacy, to make no peace with King Roger II of Sicily or other enemies of the Church without the consent of Eugene, and to help Eugene regain control of the city of Rome. Frederick undertook 6 expeditions into Italy. In the first, beginning in October 1154, his plan was to launch a campaign against the Normans under King William I of Sicily. He marched down and almost immediately encountered resistance to his authority. Obtaining the submission of Milan, he successfully besieged Tortona on February 13, 1155, razing it to the ground on April 18th. He moved on to Pavia, where, according to some historians, he received the Iron Crown and the title of King of Italy on April 24th. Other historians, instead, suggest his coronation took place in Monza on April 15th. Moving through Bologna and Tuscany, he was soon approaching the city of Rome. There, Pope Adrian IV was struggling with the forces of the Republican city commune led by Arnold of Brescia. As a sign of good faith, Frederick dismissed the ambassadors from the revived Roman Senate, and imperial forces suppressed the Republicans. Arnold was captured and hanged for treason and rebellion. Despite his unorthodox teaching concerning theology, Arnold was not charged with heresy. As Frederick approached the gates of Rome, the Pope advanced to meet him. At the royal tent, the king received him, and after kissing the Pope's feet, Frederick expected to receive the traditional kiss of peace. Frederick had declined to hold the Pope's stirrup while leading him to the tent, however, so Adrian IV refused to give the kiss until this protocol had been complied with. Frederick hesitated, and Adrian IV withdrew. After a day's negotiation, Frederick agreed to perform the required ritual, reportedly muttering, "For Peter, not for Adrian." Rome was still in an uproar over the fate of Arnold of Brescia, so rather than marching through the streets of Rome, Frederick and Adrian retired to the Vatican. The next day, June 18, 1155, Adrian IV crowned Frederick the First Holy Roman Emperor at St. Peter's Basilica, amidst the acclamations of the German army. The Romans began to riot, and Frederick spent his coronation day putting down the revolt. The revolt resulted in the deaths of over 1,000 Romans and many more thousands injured. The next day, Frederick, Adrian, and the German army traveled to Tivoli. From there, a combination of the unhealthy Italian summer and the effects of his year-long absence from Germany meant he was forced to put off his planned campaign against the Normans of Sicily. On their way northwards, they attacked Spoleto and encountered the ambassadors of Manuel I Comnenus, who showered Frederick with costly gifts. At Verona, Frederick declared his fury with the rebellious Milanese before finally returning to Germany. Disorder was again rampant in Germany, especially in Bavaria, but general peace was restored by Frederick's vigorous but conciliatory measures. The Duchy of Bavaria was transferred from Henry II Jasomirgott, Margrave of Austria, to Frederick's formidable younger cousin Henry the Lion, Duke of Saxony, of the House of Guelph, whose father had previously held both duchies. Henry II Jasomirgott was named Duke of Austria in compensation for his loss of Bavaria. As part of his general policy of concessions of formal power to the German princes and ending the civil wars within the kingdom, Frederick further appeased Henry by issuing him with the Privilegium Minus, granting him unprecedented entitlements as Duke of Austria. This was a large concession on the part of Frederick, who realized that Henry the Lion had to be accommodated, even to the point of sharing some power with him. Frederick could not afford to make an outright enemy of Henry. On June 9, 1156 at Würzburg, Frederick married Beatrice of Burgundy, daughter and heiress of Renaud III, thus adding to his possessions the sizable realm of the County of Burgundy. In an attempt to create comedy, Emperor Frederick proclaimed the Peace of the Land, written between 1152 and 1157, which enacted punishments for a variety of crimes, as well as systems for adjudicating many disputes. He also declared himself the sole Augustus of the Roman world, ceasing to recognize Manuel I at Constantinople. The retreat of Frederick in 1155 forced Pope Adrian IV to come to terms with King William I of Sicily, granting to William I territories that Frederick viewed as his dominion. This aggrieved Frederick, and he was further displeased when papal legates chose to interpret a letter from Adrian to Frederick in a manner that seemed to imply that the imperial crown was a gift from the papacy, and that in fact the empire itself was a fief of the papacy. Disgusted with the Pope, and still wishing to crush the Normans in the south of Italy, in June 1158, Frederick set out upon his second Italian expedition, accompanied by Henry the Lion and his Saxon troops. This expedition resulted in the revolt and capture of Milan, the Diet of Roncaglia that saw the establishment of imperial officers and ecclesiastical reforms in the cities of northern Italy, and the beginning of the long struggle with Pope Alexander III. Milan soon rebelled again and humiliated Empress Beatrice. The death of Pope Adrian IV in 1159 led to the election of two rival popes, Alexander III and the antipope Victor IV, and both sought Frederick's support. Frederick, busy with the siege of Crema, appeared unsupportive of Alexander III, and after the sacking of Crema demanded that Alexander appear before the emperor at Pavia and accept the imperial decree. Alexander refused, and Frederick recognized Victor IV as the legitimate pope in 1160. In response, Alexander III excommunicated both Frederick I and Victor IV. Frederick attempted to convoke a joint council with King Louis VII of France in 1162 to decide the issue of who should be pope. Louis neared the meeting site, but when he became aware that Frederick had stacked the votes for Victor, Louis decided not to attend the council. As a result, the issue was not resolved at that time. The political result of the struggle with Pope Alexander was an alliance formed between the Norman state of Sicily and Pope Alexander III against Frederick. In the meantime, Frederick had to deal with another rebellion at Milan, in which the city surrendered on March 6, 1162. Much of it was destroyed 3 weeks later on the emperor's orders. The fate of Milan led to the submission of Brescia, Placentia, and many other northern Italian cities. In August 1162, he triumphantly entered Turin and was crowned with his consort in the cathedral on August 15th. Returning to Germany towards the close of 1162, Frederick prevented the escalation of conflicts between Henry the Lion from Saxony and a number of neighboring princes who were growing weary of Henry's power, influence, and territorial gains. He also severely punished the citizens of Mainz for their rebellion against Archbishop Arnold. In Frederick's third visit to Italy in 1163, his plans for the conquest of Sicily were ruined by the formation of a powerful league against him, brought together mainly by opposition to imperial taxes. In 1164, Frederick took the relics of the biblical Magi from Milan and gave them to the Archbishop of Cologne, Reinald of Dassel. The relics had great religious significance and attracted pilgrims from all over Christendom. After the death of Antipope Victor IV, Frederick supported Antipope Paschal III, but he was soon driven from Rome, leading to the return of Pope Alexander III in 1165. Frederick focused on restoring peace in the Rhineland, organizing a celebration of Charlemagne's canonization at Aachen under Antipope Paschal III's authority. Concerned over rumors of an alliance between Alexander III and Byzantine Emperor Manuel I, Frederick embarked on his fourth Italian campaign in October 1166. Frederick aimed to secure Paschal III's claim and his wife Beatrice's coronation as Holy Roman Empress. Henry the Lion refused to join Frederick, focusing on his own disputes. In 1167, Frederick besieged Ancona, which acknowledged Manuel I's authority and achieved victory over the Romans at the Battle of Monte Porzio. Heartened by victory, Frederick lifted the siege of Ancona, hurried to Rome, had his wife crowned empress, and received a second coronation from Paschal III. Frederick's campaign was halted by an epidemic, possibly malaria or plague, which threatened the imperial army and forced him to flee to Germany for 6 years. During this period, Frederick decided conflicting claims to bishoprics, asserted authority over Bohemia, Poland, and Hungary, initiated relations with Manuel I, and sought understanding with Henry II of England and Louis VII of France. Many Swabian counts, including his cousin the young Duke of Swabia, Frederick IV, died in 1167, so he was able to organize a new mighty territory in the Duchy of Swabia under his reign in this time. Consequently, his younger son Frederick V became the new Duke of Swabia in 1167, while his eldest son Henry was crowned King of the Romans in 1169, alongside his father, who also retained the title. Increasing anti-German sentiments swept through Lombardy, culminating in the restoration of Milan in 1169. In 1174, Frederick made his fifth expedition to Italy, opposed by the pro-papal Lombard League. The cities of northern Italy had become exceedingly wealthy through trade, representing a marked turning point in the transition from medieval feudalism. While continental feudalism remained strong, it was in political decline. When the northern Italian cities inflicted a defeat on Frederick at Alessandria in 1175, the European world was shocked. With Henry the Lion's refusal to help, the campaign was a complete failure. Frederick suffered a heavy defeat at the Battle of Legnano near Milan on May 29, 1176, where he was wounded and believed dead for some time. This battle marked the turning point in Frederick's claim to empire. He had no choice other than to begin negotiations for peace with Alexander III and the Lombard League. In the Peace of Anagni in 1176, Frederick recognized Alexander III as Pope. In the Peace of Venice in 1177, Frederick and Alexander III were formally reconciled. With decisions of Paschal III nullified, Beatrice ceased to be referred to as Empress. The scene was similar to that which had occurred between Pope Gregory VII and Henry IV, Holy Roman Emperor at Canossa a century earlier. The conflict was the same as that resolved in the Concordat of Worms. Did the Holy Roman Emperor have the power to name the Pope and bishops? The investiture controversy from previous centuries had been brought to a tendentious peace with the Concordat of Worms and affirmed in the First Council of the Lateran. Now it had recurred in a slightly different form. Frederick had to humble himself before Alexander III at Venice. The emperor acknowledged the Pope's sovereignty over the Papal States, and in return, Alexander acknowledged the emperor's overlordship of the imperial church. Also, in the Peace of Venice, a truce was made with the Lombard cities, which took effect in August 1178. The grounds for a permanent peace were not established until 1183, however, in the Peace of Constance, when Frederick conceded their right to freely elect town magistrates. By this move, Frederick recovered his nominal domination over Italy, which became his chief means of applying pressure on the papacy. In a move to consolidate his reign after the disastrous expedition into Italy, Frederick was formally crowned king of Burgundy at Arles on June 30th, 1178. Although traditionally the German kings had automatically inherited the royal crown of Arles since the time of Conrad II, Frederick felt the need to be crowned by the Archbishop of Arles, regardless of his laying claim to the title from 1152. Frederick did not forgive Henry the Lion for refusing to come to his aid in 1176. By 1180, Henry had successfully established a powerful state comprising Saxony, Bavaria, and substantial territories in the north and east of Germany. Taking advantage of the hostility of other German princes to Henry, Frederick had Henry tried in absentia by a court of bishops and princes in 1180, declared that imperial law overruled traditional German law, and had Henry stripped of his lands and declared an outlaw. He then invaded Saxony with an imperial army to force his cousin to surrender. Henry's allies deserted him, and he finally had to submit to Frederick at an imperial diet in Erfurt in November 1181. Henry spent 3 years in exile at the court of his father-in-law Henry II of England in Normandy before being allowed back into Germany. He finished his days in Germany as the much-diminished Duke of Brunswick. Frederick's desire for revenge was sated. Henry the Lion lived a relatively quiet life, sponsoring arts and architecture. Frederick's victory over Henry did not gain him as much in the German feudalistic system as it would have in the English feudalistic system. While in England the pledge of fealty went in a direct line from overlords to those under them, the Germans pledged oaths only to the direct overlord, so that in Henry's case, those below him in the feudal chain owed nothing to Frederick. Thus, despite the diminished stature of Henry the Lion, Frederick did not gain his allegiances. Frederick was faced with the reality of disorder among the German states, where continuous civil wars were waged between pretenders and the ambitious who wanted the crown for themselves. Italian unity under German rule was more myth than truth. Despite proclamations of German hegemony, the Pope was the most powerful force in Italy. When Frederick returned to Germany after his defeat in northern Italy, he was a bitter and exhausted man. The German princes, far from being subordinated to royal control, were intensifying their hold on wealth and power in Germany and entrenching their positions. There began to be a generalized social desire to create Greater Germany by conquering the Slavs to the east. Although the Italian city-states had achieved a measure of independence from Frederick as a result of his failed fifth expedition into Italy, the emperor had not given up on his Italian dominions. In 1184, he held a massive celebration, the Diet of Pentecost, when his 2 eldest sons were knighted and thousands of knights were invited from all over Germany. While payments upon the knighting of a son were part of the expectations of an overlord in England and France, only a gift was given in Germany for such an occasion. Frederick's monetary gain from this celebration is said to have been modest. Later in 1184, Frederick again moved into Italy, this time joining forces with the local rural nobility to reduce the power of the Tuscan cities. In 1186, he engineered the marriage of his son Henry to Constance of Sicily, heiress to the Kingdom of Sicily, over the objections of Pope Urban III. Pope Urban III died shortly after, and was succeeded by Pope Gregory VIII, who even as papal chancellor had pursued a more conciliatory line with the emperor than previous popes, and was more concerned with troubling reports from the Holy Land than with a power struggle with Barbarossa. Around November 23, 1187, Frederick received letters urging him to aid the Crusader states in the Near East. Around December 1st, Cardinal Henry of Marseille preached a crusade sermon before Frederick in a public assembly in Strasbourg. Frederick expressed support for the crusade, but declined to take the cross due to his conflict with Archbishop Philip of Cologne. He urged King Philip II of France to take the cross through messengers and a personal meeting on December 25th. On March 27, 1188, at the Diet of Mainz, the Archbishop of Cologne submitted to Frederick. Bishop of Würzburg preached a crusade sermon, and Frederick took the Crusaders' vow at the assembly's acclaim. His second son followed suit, while his eldest stayed as regent. At Mainz, Frederick proclaimed a general expedition against the pagans and set the preparation period from April 17, 1188 to April 8, 1189, with the army to assemble at Regensburg on April 23, 1189. At Strasbourg, Frederick imposed a small tax on the Jews of Germany to fund the crusade, put them under his protection, and forbade preaching against them. When mobs threatened the Jews of Mainz, he sent Henry of Calden to disperse them. Rabbi Moses met with Frederick, resulting in an edict threatening maiming or death for harming Jews. On March 29th, Frederick and the rabbi rode through the streets together, preventing massacres like those in the First and Second Crusades. Frederick had a treaty with Saladin from 1175, so he felt it necessary to notify Saladin of its termination. On May 26, 1188, he sent Count Henry II of Dietz to present an ultimatum to Saladin. A few days after Christmas 1188, Frederick received Hungarian, Byzantine, Serbian, and Seljuk envoys in Nuremberg. The Hungarians and Seljuks promised provisions and safe conduct to the Crusaders. The envoys of Stefan Nemanja, Grand Prince of Serbia, announced that their prince would receive Frederick in Niš. Only with difficulty was an agreement reached with the Byzantine envoy, John Komateros. Frederick sent a large embassy ahead to make preparations in Byzantium. On April 15, 1189, in Haguenau, Frederick formally and symbolically accepted the staff and scrip of a pilgrim and set out. His crusade was the most meticulously planned and organized up to that time. According to one source written in the 1220s, Frederick organized a grand army of 100,000 men and set out on the overland route to the Holy Land. Modern scholars believe the army was 12,000 to 15,000 men. On May 11, 1189, after the majority of his army had already departed toward Hungary on land, Frederick sailed from Regensburg down the river Danube. When he came to the village of Mauthausen, Frederick ordered the village to be burned for levying a toll on the Crusader army. The Crusaders then passed through Hungary, Serbia, and Bulgaria before entering Byzantine territory. While in Hungary, Barbarossa personally asked the Hungarian Prince Geza, brother of King Bela III of Hungary, to join the crusade. The king agreed, and a Hungarian army of 2,000 men, led by Geza, escorted the German emperor's forces. Later on, Frederick camped in Philippopolis, then in Adrianople in the autumn of 1189 to avoid the winter climate in Anatolia. In the meantime, he received imprisoned German emissaries who were held in Constantinople and exchanged hostages with Isaac II. In March 1190, Frederick left Adrianople for Gallipoli at the Dardanelles to embark to Asia Minor. The armies coming from Western Europe pushed on through Anatolia, where they were victorious at the Battle of Philomelium and defeated the Turks in the Battle of Iconium. Eventually reaching as far as Cilician Armenia, the approach of Barbarossa's victorious German army greatly concerned Saladin, who was forced to weaken his force at the Siege of Acre and send troops to block the arrival of the Germans. Barbarossa opted on the local Armenians' advice to follow a shortcut along the Salef River. Meanwhile, the army started to traverse the mountain path. On June 10, 1190, he drowned near Silif Castle in the Salef River. There are several conflicting accounts of the event. According to Anspert, against everyone's advice, the emperor chose to swim across the river and was swept away by the current. Another account recorded that Frederick was thrown from his horse while crossing the river, weighed down by his armor, and drowned. According to the chronicler Ibn al-Athir, the king went down to the river to wash himself and was drowned at a place where the water was not even up to his waist. The writer of the letter on the death of the Emperor Frederick reported that after the many and terrible exertions that he had undergone, he decided to bathe in that same river. Frederick, who liked to swim, might have been exhausted from weeks of marching, hence he was fatally affected by the very hot summer in Anatolia. If the writer was Godfrey of Spitzenberg, Bishop of Würzburg, the report would be the most plausible account of what happened, since he might have witnessed the emperor's death. Jacques de Vitry, a historian of the Crusades, outlined Frederick's endeavors and Saladin's dilemma, reporting on Frederick's journey and achievements. Frederick, the Roman emperor, set out on his journey by land with great power and a countless host of warriors. Passing over the borders of Germany, he crossed Hungary, Macedonia, and Greece and marched through the land of the Saracens with a mighty hand. He took Iconium, Philomena, and many other cities, and reached Armenia, where, during great heat, he went into the river to bathe. In the river, which the natives call the Iron River, he was miserably drowned, and so died to the loss of all Christendom. Saladin so greatly feared his approach that he ordered the walls of Laodicea, Giblet, Tortosa, Biblium, and Beirut to be pulled down. Saladin spared only the fortresses, that is the citadels and towers, in anticipation of Frederick's approach. Frederick's death caused several thousand German soldiers to leave the force and return home through the Cilician and Syrian ports. The German-Hungarian army was struck with an onset of disease near Antioch, weakening it further. Only 5,000 soldiers, a third of the original force, arrived in Acre. Barbarossa's son, Frederick VI of Swabia, carried on with the remnants of the German army, along with the Hungarian army under the command of Prince Gaza. They aimed to bury the emperor in Jerusalem, but efforts to preserve his body in vinegar failed. Hence, his flesh was interred in the Cathedral of St. Peter in Antioch, his bones in the Cathedral of Tyre, and his heart and inner organs in St. Paul's Church, Tarsus. The unexpected demise of Frederick left the Crusader army under the command of the rivals Philip II and Richard, who had traveled to Palestine separately by sea, and ultimately led to its dissolution. Richard continued to the east where he fought Saladin, winning territories along the shores of Palestine, but ultimately failed to win the war by conquering Jerusalem itself before he was forced to return to his own territories. He returned home after he signed the Treaty of Ramla, agreeing that Jerusalem would remain under Muslim control while allowing unarmed Christian pilgrims and traders to visit the city. The treaty also reduced the Latin kingdom to a geopolitical coastal strip extending from Tyre to Jaffa. Frederick is the subject of many legends, including that of a Kifhauser legend. Legend says he is not dead, but asleep with his knights in a cave in the Kifhauser Mountains in Thuringia or Mount Untersberg at the border between Bavaria, Germany, and Salzburg, Austria. When the ravens cease to fly around the mountain, he will awake and restore Germany to its ancient greatness. According to the story, his red beard has grown through the table at which he sits. His eyes are half closed in sleep, but now and then he raises his hand and sends a boy out to see if the ravens have stopped flying. Frederick's legend was further reinforced in the early 20th century when Adolf Hitler named Nazi Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union after him, which ended like Barbarossa's end in a strange historical paradox. Thank you for watching. Press subscribe button for more historical content. This is Morasel channel on YouTube. We seek to provide content worthy of. Join the journey through history with Morasel. Are you fascinated by the stories of the past? Do you want to explore the rich history of the Middle East and Europe? Look no further. Subscribe to Morasel, where we delve deep into the captivating events, remarkable civilizations, and influential figures that shaped the world as we know it today. From ancient empires to pivotal moments in modern history, our channel offers a unique blend of engaging storytelling and in-depth analysis. Hit the subscribe button now and become part of our growing community of history enthusiasts. Let's uncover the mysteries of the past together.